Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Paul Barnes. I'm the Managing Director for EMEA at App Annie. I'd like to start by thanking the PGC crew really for organising this. I think, it's clearly a really difficult time personally and business-wise for pretty much all of us. And I think it's important that we do try and keep things going. We do strive for business as usual, although it's very difficult. And I think I just really applaud this effort in getting it going. So thank you very much. Right, so my bit today is this Q1 gaming look back. And I'm sure all of you know we do this annual review. We published that in January, had an amazing uptake this year. And then we do these quarterly updates, although normally they're pretty low key. It's just a kind of look at key trends, any new games that are coming through and so on. This, in my 4 years or so with App Annie, is just different to any other quarter we've had. So there is a lot to talk about. What I'll say is, let me just check my slides are moving. There we go. What I'll say is that the effects here, the effects of the lockdown, the pandemic, have come at different times through the quarter in different regions. And for certainly for Europe, US, it's right towards the back end of the quarter. So we're not seeing all of the impact in the quarterly data. So what I'm going to do within the session today is try and be a little bit more granular. We've looked at some weekly data, monthly data, try and see those leading indicators that show us what's going on. And we will need to come back to it, of course, in Q2 and throughout Q2. So that's what we're going to try and do in the next 15, 20 minutes or so. Obviously, that's me. I'm not going to spend time on App Annie. I would normally do the bit here, the show of hands, who's an App Annie customer, those kinds of things, but we're not going to spend time on that today. So hopefully I'm not being arrogant in assuming you all know who we are. If you don't, then do look us up and we'd be happy to talk to you. All right, so let's get started. I want to give a bit of context before diving into Q1 by looking at where we were, what we carried into Q1 from 2019. And 2019 was a huge year. It was it continues to grow, continues to be a record year in mobile. This is just looking at some really top level numbers. So this isn't gaming, this is everything in the mobile app economy. Across iOS, Google Play, third-party Android, and we topped 200 billion downloads in 2019. But what you see is it's starting to flatten. So this downloads growth, even in India, you can see the grey line here for India, even those huge markets, emerging markets that have driven a lot of the growth in downloads are starting to flatten out now. So whilst downloads are starting to flatten, usage and time spent continues to increase. And importantly, for the discussion today, revenue continues to increase at pace. So this is just store revenue, it's not advertising revenue. But store revenue, we had this number across the app economy of 120 billion. Now, the key, probably a more relevant number for the audience today is how much of that is gaming. And it's 72% of that figure, so 86 billion in gaming. In gaming revenue across the stores in 2019 was what we were looking at. And the question was, where's that going? Where's that going to increase to? And I actually stood on stage at the kickoff of PGC in London in January and had this discussion with people about, are we going to get mobile gaming to 100 billion in 2020? Which, when you think the whole of the recorded music industry is 20 billion annually, it's just a real sense of scale of what's been achieved with mobile gaming. So that's just some context, what we carried into the start of the quarter. Now, not all the graphs in Q1 have looked like this. In fact, many more have looked like this. It's been an incredibly tough time economically across the world. This is FTSE values, but you could do the same with most asset prices across the quarter. It's really been very, very difficult and continues to be for many companies, for many of us individually. However, there's been a change in the way we live, and that's impacted people's needs, people's demands, and so on. So with change always comes opportunity, and Some graphs have looked differently. Some graphs have looked more like this. So I was going to do a sort of bit of fun with this around trying to get people to guess what it is, but I just couldn't find a way of doing it, really. You can maybe get a clue from the fact it's Google Trends analysis. But this is actually searches for best mobile games on Google. And you see this crazy spike here. Obviously a spike in the middle around Christmas holidays, you might expect. But this is indexed. So you see it effectively doubles during lockdown. So the number of people searching for best mobile games doubles during lockdown on Google. They search for other things as well. This isn't the only search term that spiked. How to cut your own hair was one that spiked, possibly even more than this. I'm sure some of you will have, like me, some funny family stories of cutting your own hair. So anyway, that's where it is. But this probably brings my first point. There's a few takeaways from the session today, but this would be the first one, which is App Store optimization. A lot of gaming companies I talk to don't really spend much attention or pay much attention to App Store optimization. And there's evidence for that. And when they've tried, it hasn't really made a big impact. So kind of why bother? But now is the time. There are a lot of new people looking for mobile games to play who haven't looked for them before, and they are searching for them. So if you want them to discover your games and you want them to convert to play your games, then you need to be on top of App Store optimization. Question that follows this is, are these converting to downloads? I think pretty much everyone here knows the answer to that, which is yes, yes, they do. And so this is downloads across the quarter, and we broke it down. Well, you can see the sort of breakdown of the quarter here. You can see it's pretty flat. It was a good quarter, and across the quarter, it was sort of 20% up. Quarter on quarter was Q1, and 25% up year on year in downloads. So it's a big spike for sure. But you see how much of it is weighted to the back end here. And we are just looking at iOS and Google Play here. I haven't put third-party Android in China in here. But it gives you a sense of the spike this week here, this week of 22nd of March, which we'll talk about a few times in the session, this 50% spike in downloads over the average for Q4 in 2019. So it just gives you just the enormous increase that we had right at the end of the quarter. Which made it the biggest week ever for mobile gaming. It's the biggest quarter ever for mobile gaming in terms of downloads. So the question I'm sure lots of people ask is that converting into revenue? So let's look at that. The answer is no, not so far anyway. And there's a few points behind this. I think there's 3 points. One is the obvious one about economics, economy, and people being concerned about downturn and spending and so on, which potential revenue pressures there. Maybe a more impactful point even than that is that a lot of the games that are being downloaded are games that are hyper casual games that monetize predominantly or significantly through advertising. So you don't see the impact quite so much here in the store data. But the other impact here, or the other theory, if you like, which we're proving at the moment, is that a lot of this growth is coming from people new to gaming. And whenever you look at a new market, you look at a new segment, new group of people, whatever, and any segment, any group like that, you always see this phased maturity, where you see downloads kick first. People play around with different games, they figure out what they want to invest time in, and then you see usage increase as they invest more time, and then you see revenue increase. So revenue, when you have a new segment of players, revenue always lags behind usage lags behind downloads. So you wouldn't expect, given the timing of this across almost towards the end of the quarter, you wouldn't necessarily expect to see a spike in revenue if these are new players. Okay, so that's a global view. Let's take a look more regionally. The obvious place to start is China, of course. We'll try and do this roughly chronologically with how the impact rolled out. So you can see there in February in China, and we're just looking at iOS data as an indicator of what's going on in China. But you can see that 25% spike in downloads in February compared to January, which is when the impact was predominant in China. And then you see it does tail off. So it's almost back by the end of March to where it was in January. This is a sort of January average compared to then the individual weeks of March. So that's the download picture. It's back to what I was saying a minute ago about downloads and then leading to usage. If you do look at usage data, so this is time spent, this is weekly hours spent in games in China. And again, we're looking at January, this big spike in February, so the average in February being 30% up. And whilst we do see a drop, it's not the same drop as we had with downloads. So there is a real indication here that there are both players playing more and also new people, because this is total hours spent, new players investing time, having spiked and played around with downloads, spending more time within games now. So the usage hasn't dropped off in the same way that the downloads did for China. Okay, so that's the China picture. Let's look at Italy, the next place to go. And you can see this spike is much bigger in downloads. It's actually 60% in this key week of 22nd of March. It builds up. It was obviously a slightly slower build up. There wasn't the immediate lockdown in Italy. But it's a big increase, right? 60% increase over the average of January. By this week of 22nd of March. And the top games there, Brain Out, Draw Climber, and Slap Kings were the top three that were driving there. So very casual, casual theme there. So that's Italy. Let's look at France. And you can see it's really marked. This is the week where President Macron announced the lockdown in France. And you see this huge spike straight away. Similar to Italy, it's casual, hyper casual games. Parkmaster did very well, and Perfect Cream did incredibly well, which I thought was interesting culturally with the cuisine and the culinary skills in France. That Perfect Cream should do so well. But 55% increase, and then if we look at the UK, you see here. It's a similar story, right? So the UK was later in the rollout of the lockdown. This week here is where it really struck. And you see similar. So you have 50% in UK, 55 in France, 60 in Italy. So really, really consistent across these markets, this increase in downloads. And again, it was similar kind of games. Slap Kings did well. Slap Kings did well across all these markets, actually. I don't know if that's a sign of sort of frustration, people's frustration of having to stay in all the time, but it was a really noticeable one. Now, again, just back to this question of, is this growth coming from new people who are playing mobile games with any kind of investment for the first time, or is it existing gamers shuffling and looking for new games to play? And we will do more on this. The data isn't really clear enough yet to give a solid answer. We will look at things like cross-app use and audience demographic shift in these games. But one of the things I did just for the talk today was look at advanced reviews. So one of our recently released products is advanced reviews. If you're an App Annie customer, you haven't looked at it, do take a look at it. It's really good. Pulls out thematic analysis and other ways of taking actionable insight out of the reviews you have. And I looked at reviews for some of these top games like Perfect Cream, Slap King, before and at this point of the lockdown, to see if there was any change in the themes that were coming through in reviews. And it's really marked. What comes out immediately after the lockdown is lots of players who are very frustrated. They love the game, but they can't understand why there's so many adverts in the game. Now, if people are frustrated and don't understand that there are adverts in the game, then clearly they are pretty much first-time players of these types of hyper casual games that monetize through advertising. So a real strong evidence point that this is, along with the growth in search terms, that it really is being significantly driven by new players. All right, so we've talked quite a lot about downloads, a bit about revenue. Let's look at usage. Again, the usage data will lag behind downloads, but we are starting to see some spikes. Interestingly, we're looking at a few Western markets here, but Italy, we see where the pandemic struck first, is where we've seen the biggest increase in usage. And I think, I'm sure we'll start to see this in UK. Obviously not much impact in March in UK. I'm sure we'll see it in April. But in terms of the games that are taking most time, that are top of the ranking charts for usage, there's some trends in there. I think it was interesting that Pokemon Go was top of the US, which I think they did a really great job in changing the game mechanic to reflect the lockdown and people not being out and about. In Italy, we saw Candy Crush double usage, double in terms of total time spent week on week during the lockdown. So a real strong casual impact there. In Germany, we saw a week on week increase of 130% on Roblox. So there's really a trend happening there with the schools being closed, kids at home and spending time on that. And then finally on this, the other one that caught my eye in France was Brawl Stars. We saw a 50% week on week usage increase in Brawl Stars. And seeing that in some other places as well, with these games with social aspects are doing very well. We talked about it in previous webcasts and so on about Gen Z and the strong impact with Gen Z there, but it's definitely something that's part of this growth. Okay, so that's time spent. Looking a little bit broader at the ecosystem, Discord and Twitch have both spiked significantly during this time. You can see this is the rankings on Discord, France and Germany. You see it impact around the time of the lockdown there. That's Discord. Twitch is the same. And you see Twitch developing their model now. There's cooking and other things going on, and there's clearly people spending significantly more time with Twitch. So that was just a kind of side point. I want to do a little bit on genres. I'm not going to spend too long on this. I'm going to try and wrap up in a couple of minutes, in fact. So you may have seen this. We did this in some of the PGC talks in January. This comes from our own analysis. So we have a product called Game IQ, which is in labs and sort of beta at the moment for any App Annie customers. But it's our own taxonomy, own categorization of the market. So you see the sort of tunings, casual, casino, core, and then the themes and the sub themes and IP modifiers, all kinds of stuff in there. But the message is, when you look at it quarterly, it hasn't changed. So arcade in Q1 was 29% of downloads. Across 2019, it was 27%. Puzzle was 23%. It was 23% in 2019. Action, in 1 or 2 percentage point change on some of these, but nothing more than that. So it hasn't really changed yet. Now it is quarterly analysis, so we may see this shift. It's something we should come back to a little bit in Q2. We have seen some of the games at the top change. So within arcade, Subway Surfers was top game of 2019 in Q1, drops to 3rd. Wood Turning and Johnny Trigger put a top 2 in there. In puzzle, Brain Out had a really strong Q1, was top of the download charts there, ahead of Gardenscapes. In action, Hunter Assassin came in ahead of PUBG. So a few changes in the download, in the picture of downloads, but not really at a genre level. And it's similar with revenue. When you look at that, always see this, the RPG numbers driving so much of the revenue. See core driving 2/3. So again, this hasn't changed radically since 2019. Some of the games have changed, with China having the impact first. Interestingly, Game for Peace came out top monetization and top game for revenue in core. But other than that, not a lot of changes. Casinos done very well, still driven really. Coin Master being the biggest one in there. With RPGs, not a lot of change. You see Monster Strike, AFK Arena, Lineage 2, top 3 within there. Rise of Kingdoms in strategy. I think that's pretty much all to say there. I've got an eye on time as well. So just wrapping up, these are the charts. So you see sort of start of quarter, end of quarter, worldwide and UK. We've talked about a lot of the games on here. I'd say ones that don't show on the charts: Roblox, Minecraft, really big increases as you'd expect. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty much it to say on there. So just wrapping up my summary slide for you, I'd say that the social side, I talked about Brawl Stars in France. I've seen it elsewhere. 8-ball pool is an example. There are lots of anecdotes, actually, people playing 8-ball pool with their parents and multiplayer on that. There's it's pretty obvious, but with people not being able to socialize so much, we are seeing these games with social elements do really well. Secondly, I said it near the top, ASO optimization. If it's not something you've looked at, do look at it, because there are new players now who are experimenting, trying to find games, and they are using search more than you'd see elsewhere. Partner up. I didn't talk about this in the slides, which I should have done maybe. There was a lot of, we're seeing this trend of big brands partner with mobile gaming. I think they really understood that the scale of mobile gaming is so big now that it makes sense for brands who would never have looked at it before to partner. So we've seen with NFL and Fortnite, Louis Vuitton, League of Legends. A lot of those brands are struggling at the moment, and partnerships for them with mobile gaming would be so beneficial. And I think if that's anything you've looked at, really now is the time to go and be proactive with it. And then finally, I'd say on the revenue side, be creative, or maybe be patient is probably a better way of saying it with monetization. There are a lot of new gamers that they're not monetizing straight away. There's uncertainty economically. So the key is about getting the new gamers, playing your games, focusing on the time spent, and monetization will come. So that's pretty much everything I have to say. Just a final word, if you have follow-ups. If you're an App Annie customer, we're here to help. So if there's data you haven't got, if you need support, talk to your customer success manager or your AM. And again, if you're a gaming company that isn't an App Annie customer, you need data as part of key decisions. We are here to support. So we're being very flexible through this period. If you want trial access or something like that, then do reach out to us. We are trying to play a role which we see for ourselves in supporting the industry. So do get in touch if we can help.
Awesome, Paul. That was really great. Not that I'm surprised, it's always good, but that was really great. Really great insights there. You've kind of answered a lot of the questions I was trying to type down while you were going. But we do have various questions from the audience. So I'm going to try and get through a few of those before I usher forth the next speaker. One question I want to ask before I get into that, though, is obviously, and maybe you covered this in the slides, I was dashing in between and answering questions elsewhere, but obviously, as you say, people go into isolation. This is not a desired thing, but it's a thing that's happening. That naturally channels people into mobile games, other games, TV, whatever. When in China, where we're seeing, or in other parts of Asia, where we're seeing a kind of loosening of restrictions to some degree, do we then see that? Are you seeing that kind of trend straight away drop off, or are they maintaining a lot of those new users that have kind of come in and engaging? Or is it too early to say that?
I think early indications are that it has changed behavior. So there's definitely this up and down in downloads as people think, what are we going to do? And downloads does drop away, but we're seeing the usage data stay high. So in terms of total time spent in gaming, it does seem to be staying higher and not dropping back as China starts to go back to work. Obviously, as you say, it is early days with it, but you can see that the usage is so far staying high.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go into a couple of questions here. I'm going to go through them slightly randomly. I've gone from 2 to 9, so there's more than I expected. There you go. I won't get through all of those, but I'll try. Is it all about the big guys, top 100, 200, getting more traffic, or is there an uplift for all, as in indie lower chart positions too?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think if you look at where people are finding games, it's through searches. Obviously, featuring those kinds of things are very important at the moment. That does tend to skew it towards the big games for sure. Tends to skew it to people with money. But I'd say on that App Store optimization point, if you're smart with that, if you're an indie game and you want to get presence, really look at ASO. It could be a way of getting picking up some new users in a way that, and often the big companies aren't so good at ASO. So
change your name to Best Mobile Games.
Something like that. Yeah.
Are you seeing any changes in the number of new game launches?
It's a question I don't have an answer for. Actually, it's not so far. It's not surfaced. I think it's something that we will look at, but no, I've not seen a significant change in that.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I haven't looked for it. I haven't looked for it, to be fair.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Yeah, I guess certainly initially, at least, everybody's all in a bit of shock, so it's not like people are going to be able to just trigger loads more game launches.
Yeah, and I think there's a lag to it, isn't there? So we may see. It'll be interesting to look at that genre analysis in Q2 and see if it's shifting. If there's a sort of accommodation going back almost to new players and trying to capture more new players. Maybe another. We've talked about kind of end of hyper casual. Wouldn't be surprised to see
We've been talking about for 2 years now. The end of hyper casual has been much heralded, but never quite happened, has it?
No.
Got out of the way. I've got a question here from Alison Billis at Joypack. How much lift does a brand give to a game in terms of users and engagement? It's a brand related question.
Yeah, I think it can be significant. Because of it's almost like a different way of doing user acquisition. It's like the NFL, if you look at that, the impact with Fortnite maybe, but it's a way of tapping into a whole significant user group that you didn't have before. And we're seeing it in many different places now. We're working with some of the examples, one of the big German supermarkets who are actually getting into mobile gaming, because they have an audience there they connect with. There's kids demographics, whatever, and if there's that brand loyalty and there's that way of reaching that brand really quickly, and it's a relevant game. It's the same kind of rules as you have with IP, I guess. It needs to resonate and be relevant. But if you get that right, I think we're seeing some early indicators it's a very effective way of doing user acquisition.
Yeah, and also like you were saying before, in terms of that discovery, if it's a more casual audience, they're going to go to things they trust, have some familiarity with, I guess. So, I've got a very specific question here, so I don't know if you'll know the answer, but I shall ask. Can you share some insight on word games during COVID-19? Why have Scrabble Go and Words with Friends suddenly come to the top 10 in the UK? I noticed a spike in US rankings also for these two games.
Yeah, I think partly it's the social aspect. So a lot of these word games do have a social aspect. They're games you can play with friends and family, and it's a bit that they're almost like they're kind of towards the board game family board game end of the spectrum in terms of mobile gaming. So I think that's why we're seeing the spike. You hear anecdotally a lot of stories of people playing these games with their parents now. Because you can't get together and do family stuff. You want to spend time with family, but you want something.
Really?
Well, you feel obliged to spend time. I don't know. It depends on your family, I guess.
I mean, I do like to spend. We all want time not with the family. You need a bit of a break.
But I think word games is an obvious one, in the same way that puzzles and but puzzles tend to be more individual games. Word games, where it's got that social element, it's easy. It's got a connection back to kind of board game legacy that that new members, new family members who haven't played mobile games before are doing. So I think there's clear logic for it, and we've seen it. If you look at the sales in board games, have gone crazy as well, like physical board games.
Yeah. I'm gonna get through 2 or 3 more questions. So sorry, Chris, who's coming up next. Your time won't be short, so I'm just gonna, because there's a lot here. I want to answer a few more of these and make the most of Paul while he's here. So, do you see any trend in tablet usage? Any different trends in tablet usage in terms of playing games and downloading?
No, that's a really good question, actually, and I feel embarrassed that I don't have an answer to it.
Don't have all the data in your head. I thought you just
let me know who the if I've got access to the question, or I'll find out who that is.
Yeah, well, you can mail it. It was anonymous attendee. Some of these have got names, some haven't. So anonymous attendee who asked that question, if you email Paul,
email me.
I'm sure he can help you. There was another question on brands here. Whether again, it might be a very specific one, but what would you say are the most successful brand game collaborations in 2019? It's a challenge. Sorry, no, it's quiz, isn't it?
yeah, it is, and I think I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure there's any really nailed on in gaming yet. There's ones that are outside of gaming which you can look at. Snapchat and Nike, I think, was a really strong one in 2019. But I don't think anyone's. I think we're still playing around with it. I do like the Louis Vuitton League of Legends one. I think that got a lot of coverage and explored some of the potentials there. So in terms of publicity success, I like the LVMH Louis Vuitton and the League of Legends one, but I don't think anyone's really nailed it. And I haven't seen too many of the stats from NFL and Fortnite, but I think that's a good one too.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do two more and then I'll let you go and get the next one. So this question's been asked twice. I first only set for that I heard in a panel yesterday that IAP revenues for PC and console increasing. Games are a cheaper form of entertainment from going to a movie, restaurant, etc. Why are mobile game IAP revenues not increasing? Do you think they will increase? I assume they are increasing, but I don't know. I mean,
not increasing significantly yet, and I think yes, they will. I think partly it's because a lot of the games that have spiked first are ad monetizing games rather than IAP games, and I think partly there's a lot of players who are new players who haven't yet settled on the games they're playing to make a decision about whether they're going to spend money on it. So they're new into those free-to-play casual games. They haven't quite crossed that point where they're ready to spend money yet. So I think we will see that spike in store revenues.
Yeah,
probably pretty soon. Maybe as soon as this month.
I know this isn't necessarily core, but if do you think a sort of fringe question asked by a couple of people related to that is, do you think that that's the decrease in IAP revenue, not decrease, but will affect eCPMs of ad monetization? Do you think ad monetization will increase?
Yeah, I don't know, because if you look at macro level, there's obviously challenges with the whole advertising industry at the moment, because that's funded by people spending money on advertising and brands and so on. So I think it's really hard to say. There's so much uncertainty in the entire advertising space at the moment that I wouldn't be brave enough to make a call on that.
Okay, well, I could talk to you all morning, but I think we should let someone else speak for a bit. You'll be back. You're joining us. Are you joining us again later?
Yeah, I'm on one of the panels later on, talking about company culture, actually, which is close to my heart. So I'm looking forward to that.
Fantastic. Well, round of applause for me. I'm sure virtual round of applause for everybody else. Paul, thanks very much for your time.